check is fake!
Todd Henderson slammed the check down on the counter. The sound was like a slap, tearing through the hall.
Brenda Wilson flinched.
Sir, please, this is a bank check. My son...
Your son?
Todd's lips curled.
Little girl. The only thing your son sends you is trouble.
He pushed the check toward her as if it were rubbish.
I can smell the rubbish the moment you walk through this door.
Everyone in the hall turned to look. No one moved. No one spoke. Brenda's fingers trembled, but her voice remained steady.
I've been a customer here for 15 years.
Todd bent down, gritting his teeth.
Then you've been a fraud for 15 years. Get! Out! Out! Out!
She didn't move. The teller had no idea her son was about to ruin his own career. But before we get there, let me take you back. About 3 hours before that moment at the counter, 6:15 in the morning, Orchard Hills, Georgia. A quiet suburb about 40 minutes south of Atlanta, where the lawns are cut on Saturdays and the neighbors still wave from their porches. Brenda Wilson was already up. She stood on her front porch in a pair of worn slippers, watering can in one hand, coffee in the other. Steam curled off the mug, a faded ceramic thing that read, "Number 1 Teacher," in chipped gold letters. Her students gave it to her almost 20 years ago. She never stopped using it. The morning air smelled like wet soil and jasmine. Sprinklers hissed softly 2 houses down. A school bus rumbled past at the end of the block, and Brenda watched it go the way she always did, with a little smile, like she still missed the classroom. She taught 3rd grade for 28 years. 28 years of spelling tests, parent-teacher nights, messy art projects, and lunch-hour meltdowns. She loved every second of it. She retired 2 years ago, not because she wanted to, but because her knees couldn't take the stairs anymore. Life hadn't been easy on Brenda. Her husband, James, was a firefighter. Good man, strong hands, quiet laugh. He died in the line of duty when their son Caleb was 9 years old. A warehouse collapse on the south side of Atlanta. They gave her a folded flag and a pension check that barely covered the mortgage. She raised Caleb alone after that. No family nearby, no safety net. Just a teacher's salary, a prayer before bed, and a stubbornness that could outlast concrete. And Caleb, that boy turned out just fine. There's a photo in Brenda's hallway that tells you everything. Caleb in a black cap and gown, arms wrapped around his mother, grinning so wide you'd think his face might split. Harvard Law, class of 2016. Brenda had saved for that frame longer than she'd saved for the plane ticket to get there. Now, if you asked Brenda what her son did for a living, she'd say something like, "Oh, he's got a big job at some bank downtown. Something with contracts and legal papers. I don't understand all of it, but he works hard." What she wouldn't tell you, because she honestly didn't fully grasp the weight of it, was that 6 weeks ago, Caleb Wilson was appointed General Counsel of Crestline National Bank. That's the top legal officer, the person who oversees compliance, ethics, and every contract the bank signs. 85 branches across the Southeast reported up to his office. His appointment went out in an internal corporate memo. Most branch-level employees never saw it, and they definitely never saw his face. Remember that. It matters. Now, let's talk about the bank. The Orchard Hills branch of Crestline National Bank sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, right next to a dry cleaner and a frozen yogurt shop. Clean glass windows, a little American flag by the door, the kind of branch that looked friendly from the outside. Inside, the staff was entirely white. The clientele was mostly white, too, though a handful of Black and Latino families had moved into the neighborhood over the past decade. They were welcomed politely, but not warmly. And then there was Todd Henderson, late 30s, senior teller. Been at that branch for almost 6 years. Todd was the kind of guy who smiled wide at certain customers and barely grunted at others. You could predict which ones got which treatment just by looking at them. He'd lean against the counter, cracking jokes with his coworker, laughing a little too loud. But the second a black customer stepped to his window, something shifted. His posture stiffened. His smile disappeared. His questions got sharper. 3 complaints had been filed against Todd in the past 2 years, all from black or Latino customers, all sent to the branch manager, Gail Prescott, and all 3 were marked resolved internally. No investigation, no write-up, no discipline. Gail called it keeping the peace. Everyone else called it looking the other way. That was the bank Brenda Wilson walked into that Tuesday morning. She parked her aging sedan in the side lot, tucked the cashier's check into her purse, and stepped through the front door with a polite smile. She took a ticket, number 34. She sat down, folded her hands, and waited her turn. She had no idea what was coming. Number 34? Brenda stood up, smoothed her blouse, and walked to the counter. Todd Henderson was already seated behind the glass, leaning back in his swivel chair with a coffee cup in one hand and half a smirk on his face. He'd just finished laughing at something his coworker said. He didn't greet her. Brenda set her purse on the ledge and smiled. "Good morning. I'd like to deposit this check, please." She slid the cashier's check through the slot. $8,500, printed on official Crestline National Bank paper. Clean, crisp, watermarked. Issued by the bank's own corporate office and made out to Brenda Elaine Wilson. Todd picked it up with 2 fingers, like it was dirty. He glanced at the check. Then he looked at Brenda, slow, deliberate. His eyes moved from her reading glasses to her floral blouse to her worn leather purse. It wasn't a look of curiosity. It was an inspection. The kind of look a store clerk gives someone they're already planning to follow down the aisle. He flipped the check over, held it up toward the fluorescent light above his head, tilting it left and right, like a jeweler examining a suspect diamond. He said. Nothing else. Just, Brenda waited. Her hands rested on the counter, calm and still. Todd set the check down and tapped it with his index finger. "This doesn't look right." "I'm sorry?" "The signature. It's irregular." He pointed at the bottom of the check without actually showing her what he meant. "And this amount, $8,500. That's unusual for this type of account." Brenda blinked. "It's a cashier's check. My son sent it to me for a kitchen renovation." Todd tilted his head. That smirk again. "Your son sent you a cashier's check for $8,500? He let the number hang in the air like it was absurd. "From this bank?" The way he said it, "your son," made it sound like a joke. Like the very idea of Brenda receiving that kind of money was ridiculous. Like she had no business standing at that counter asking for anything more than a roll of quarters. Brenda's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. "Yes, sir. My son works in finance. He sent it as a gift." Todd exhaled through his nose. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned to his keyboard and began typing, slowly, performatively, like he was running some kind of deep investigation. His eyes never left the screen. Then he stopped. "I'm going to need 2 forms of government-issued ID." Brenda opened her purse without hesitation. She placed her Georgia driver's license on the counter, then her Social Security card. Both slid neatly through the slot. Todd looked at them, looked at the check, looked back at her. I'm also going to need a utility bill, something with your current address on it. Brenda paused. A utility bill? I wasn't told I'd need— Ma'am, it's standard verification. His tone was flat, rehearsed. If you can't provide it, I can't process this. But I've been a customer here for 15 years. Can't you just look up my account? Todd didn't answer. He tapped the check again. I'm not comfortable processing this without full documentation. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. Step aside. Not, please wait, or let me get my manager. Step aside. Like she was in the way. Like she was the problem. Behind her, the line had grown. A man in a golf shirt shuffled his feet. A woman with a toddler on her hip looked down at her phone. No one said anything. Brenda didn't move. Sir, I've been banking at this branch since 2009. My account is in good standing. You can verify everything right there on your screen. Todd made a show of typing again. 3 keystrokes. Then he sighed, loud, theatrical, and leaned back in his chair. The system is flagging this check. He said it like it was a verdict, final, unchallengeable. But here's the thing. There was no flag. The narrator wants you to know that right now. No system at Crestline National Bank flagged that check. Not that morning. Not ever. Todd made it up. He fabricated it the way he fabricated the irregular signature and the unusual amount. He built a wall of fake problems to block a transaction that should have taken 3 minutes. And then he said it. The line that changed everything. Todd leaned forward, looked Brenda dead in the eye, and raised his voice just enough that every person in that lobby could hear. Ma'am, we don't cash checks from people who can't even spell their own name right. He pointed at the check. He claimed there was a discrepancy between the payee line and her ID. Something about her middle initial. There wasn't. The check read Brenda Elaine Wilson. Her license read Brenda Elaine Wilson. Letter for letter. Character for character. He made it up. And he said it loud enough to make it everyone's business. The lobby went dead silent. A woman near the window put her hand over her mouth. A man in a gray suit froze mid-step. The security guard, a tall guy with a buzz cut standing near the front door, looked down at the floor like he was hoping it would swallow him. A mother near the waiting area pulled her daughter closer. Nobody spoke. Brenda's hands trembled. Just barely, a faint shake at the fingertips, like a leaf catching the edge of a breeze. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not give Todd Henderson the satisfaction of watching her fall apart in front of strangers. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and said, quiet, steady, unbroken, "My name is Brenda Elaine Wilson. That is exactly what that check says." Todd shrugged, one shoulder, lazy, dismissive. "I'm going to have to call my manager." He picked up the desk phone and dialed. 30 seconds later, the manager's office door swung open. Gail Prescott walked out like she'd been interrupted from something far more important. Mid-40s, blonde bob, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She didn't look at Brenda first. She looked at Todd. And Todd gave her a small nod. The kind co-workers exchange when they've already agreed on a story. Gail took the check, barely glanced at it. Then she turned to Brenda with that thin, corporate smile that means absolutely nothing. "Ma'am, if Todd says there's an issue with this check, then there's an issue." She placed the check on the counter like it was contaminated. We take fraud very seriously at this institution. Fraud. She said the word without flinching, in front of a full lobby, aimed directly at a woman who had done nothing wrong. Brenda's voice cracked, just a fraction. "This is not fraud. That check is from your bank." Gail folded her arms. "We may need to involve the authorities if you're unable to provide additional documentation." The authorities? For a cashier's check, issued by their own institution, given to a woman with 15 years of spotless account history. Brenda's eyes filled. She blinked hard. She pressed her lips together and breathed through her nose. But she didn't leave. "Call whoever you need to call," she said. "That check is real." 2 spots back in line, a woman named Denise Calloway had seen enough. Denise was mid-40s, black, a paralegal who worked downtown. She recognized what was happening the second Todd raised his voice, because she'd felt it before. Different place, same feeling. She didn't announce what she was doing. She didn't make a scene. She just reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and quietly raised it to chest height. Record. The red dot blinked in the corner of the screen. The camera caught everything. Todd's sneer, Gail's crossed arms, Brenda's trembling hands, and the check sitting on the counter between them like evidence in a trial that shouldn't exist. Denise leaned toward the woman next to her and whispered, barely a breath, "Are you seeing this?" What happened next should have never happened at all. Todd Henderson picked up the phone behind his counter, not the desk phone this time, but his personal cell. He turned slightly away from the lobby, cupped his hand over the speaker, and dialed the non-emergency police line. Brenda saw him do it. She saw his lips move. She saw his eyes flick toward her twice while he spoke. She couldn't hear every word, but she caught enough. "Yeah, suspected check fraud in progress. Black female, mid-50s, floral blouse." He described her race before her name, before the check amount, before anything that actually mattered. Brenda's jaw clenched. Her fingers curled around the strap of her purse so hard her knuckles went pale. She didn't say a word. She just sat down in the hard plastic chair that Gail had pointed her to, a chair near the entrance, away from the counter, away from the other customers, like a child sent to the corner. "Just wait right there, ma'am. We'll get this sorted out." That's what Gail said. Sorted out. Like Brenda was a problem that needed solving. And then the waiting began. 10 minutes passed. Brenda sat in that chair with her hands folded in her lap, her purse on her knees, her eyes fixed on the floor tiles. The lobby hummed around her like she wasn't there. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. The air conditioning rattled through a ceiling vent above her head, blowing cold air down the back of her neck. Todd went right back to work. He called the next customer, a white man in a polo shirt, maybe mid-40s, tan line from a golf glove on his left hand. The man handed over a personal check, not a cashier's check, a personal one, $12,000, handwritten. Todd glanced at it, smiled. "Big month, huh?" The man laughed. "Sold the boat." Todd processed it in under 2 minutes. One form of ID, a driver's license, no utility bill, no system flag, no suspicion, no second glance. Brenda watched the whole thing. She didn't say a word, but her chin dipped, just slightly, the way it does when someone confirms something they already knew. The next customer was a young white woman with a baby on her hip. She deposited a check for $6,000. Todd smiled at the baby, made a little wave with his fingers, and processed the transaction without a single question. The customer after that, A white man in a gray suit withdrew $9,000 in cash. Todd counted it out with a grin and wished him a good afternoon. Same bank, same morning, same teller. 3 white customers, 3 smooth transactions, 0 questions. And Brenda sat in that plastic chair the entire time, watching, invisible. The narrator doesn't need to explain what that felt like. You already know. 22 minutes after Todd made the call, the front door opened. 2 police officers walked in. The first was tall, broad-shouldered, and already scanning the lobby like he expected trouble. The second was younger, quieter, one hand resting on his belt. Todd stepped out from behind his counter immediately. Not something he'd done for Brenda. He walked toward the officers like he was greeting old friends. Handshake, head nod, lowered voice. "Thanks for coming, guys. She's right over there." He pointed at Brenda the way someone points at a stain on the carpet. The taller officer, his badge read Fowler, first name Dan, walked over to Brenda's chair. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Fowler. Can I see some identification, please?" Third time. That was the third time Brenda Wilson had been asked to prove who she was in the span of 1 hour. She reached into her purse, pulled out her driver's license, and handed it over without a word. Officer Fowler examined it. Then he walked back to Todd's counter, picked up the check, and studied it under the light. He turned it over, read the routing number, ran his thumb across the watermark. Then he pulled out his radio and called it in. The lobby was silent. Every customer had stopped pretending not to watch. The young woman with the baby held her child tighter. The man in the gray suit stood near the door, like he wasn't sure if he should leave. 2 minutes later, the confirmation came back through the radio, tinny, crackling, unmistakable. The check was completely valid. Watermark, authentic. Routing number, matched. Issuing institution, Crestline National Bank. Payee name, Brenda Elaine Wilson. Amount, $8,500. No flags, no holds, no fraud. Real. The check was real. It had always been real. Officer Fowler set the check back on the counter. He looked at Todd. Bennett Gale. His expression was hard to read, but there was something in his eyes. Something uncomfortable. "Check's clean," he said. Simple. Final. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think Todd would apologize, process the deposit, and move on with his day. He didn't. Todd crossed his arms. He shifted his weight, and he said, without even a flicker of shame, "I still don't feel comfortable. Something about this whole thing doesn't sit right with me." Something doesn't sit right. The police just confirmed the check was legitimate. His own bank issued it. The customer had 15 years of clean history. And Todd Henderson stood there, arms folded, jaw tight, and refused. Gail backed him. Of course she did. "We reserve the right to refuse any transaction," she said. Practiced, mechanical, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. Officer Fowler exhaled. He looked at Brenda, still seated, still quiet, still holding her purse like a shield, and said the only thing he seemed to think he could say. "Ma'am, there's nothing I can do if the bank won't process it. You might want to try another branch." Try another branch. After an hour of humiliation, after being called a liar, a fraud, a criminal, After having the police called on her for depositing a check her own son gave her, the answer was, go somewhere else. Brenda stood up slowly. She wasn't angry, or maybe she was, buried so deep it looked like calm. Her voice cracked for the first time. Just one fracture, thin as a hairline in glass. I have banked here for 15 years. I taught children in this neighborhood. I taught them to read. I taught them to count. She paused, swallowed. And you're telling me to go somewhere else? Nobody answered. Officer Fowler looked away. Todd stared at his screen. Gail smoothed her blazer. The lobby was a museum of frozen people pretending they couldn't hear a woman's heart breaking 10 feet away from them. Brenda picked up her purse. She took the check, her son's gift, and slid it back into the envelope. She walked past the officers, past Todd, past Gail, past every single person who had watched, and said nothing. She pushed through the front door and sat down on the metal bench outside. The Georgia sun hit her face, warm, bright, indifferent. A car horn honked somewhere down the block. A bird sat on the parking meter across the sidewalk, head tilted, watching her like it was the only living thing that cared. Brenda pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking now, not from anger, but from the kind of exhaustion that comes after holding yourself together for too long. She scrolled to Caleb and pressed call. It rang twice. Hey, Mom, what's up? She opened her mouth, and for a second, nothing came out. Then the words fell, one by one, like stones dropping into still water. She told him everything. The check, Todd, the smirk, the fake flag, the lobby full of silent faces. Gail, the police, the confirmation, the refusal. The words, people like you, can't even spell your own name. Get out. Caleb didn't interrupt. Not once. He listened the way only someone who loves you completely can listen, with his whole body, holding his breath, fists tightening where she couldn't see. When she finished, there was a pause. 3 seconds of silence that felt like 30. Then Caleb spoke. Quiet, controlled, each word placed like a brick. Mom, don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. And here's what Todd Henderson and Gail Prescott did not know, what they could not possibly have known, as they stood inside that bank congratulating themselves on following procedure. The woman they had just humiliated, insulted, and thrown out, her son wasn't just some guy who worked at a bank downtown. Her son was the general counsel of Crestline National Bank, the highest-ranking legal officer in the entire company, the man who reviewed every employee contract, every compliance policy, and every disciplinary case across all 85 branches. And he had just gotten into his car. 14 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the bank's side parking lot. The engine cut. The driver's door swung open. Out stepped Caleb Wilson. Navy suit, tailored, sharp. A leather briefcase in his left hand. His jaw was set. His eyes were still. His expression wasn't angry. It was something worse. Focused. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm makes landfall. He crossed the parking lot without rushing. His shoes clicked against the hot asphalt in a steady, even rhythm. The Georgia sun pressed down on his shoulders, but he didn't loosen his tie. He didn't hesitate. He pushed through the front door and stepped into the lobby. Todd glanced up from his window, saw the suit. saw the briefcase, didn't see a threat. "Sir, the line starts over there." Caleb didn't look at him. He walked straight past the counter, past the waiting chairs, past every frozen face, and stopped directly in front of Gail Prescott's desk. He reached into his jacket and placed something on her desk. A badge. A Crestline National Bank corporate ID. Not the plastic kind they hand out at branches. The kind that comes from the 32nd floor of the headquarters building downtown. "My name is Caleb Wilson. I'm the general counsel of Crestline National Bank." Gail's lips parted. No sound came out. "That woman you just humiliated, the one you accused of fraud, called the police on, and told to leave? That's my mother." The color drained from Gail's face like someone pulled a plug. Behind the counter, Todd Henderson froze mid-keystroke. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. His smirk was gone, replaced by something pale and twitching. Denise Calloway didn't lower her phone. The red dot kept blinking. "Pull up the account for Brenda Elaine Wilson," Caleb said. "Right now." Gail's hands fumbled across the keyboard. The screen loaded. 15 years of transaction history. 0 bounced checks. 0 overdrafts. 0 flags. A spotless record from a woman who had never caused a single problem. Caleb turned toward Todd's window. "Mr. Henderson, explain to me, on the record, why you refused to process a verified cashier's check issued by this bank." Todd's mouth opened, closed, opened again. There were irregularities. The system flagged. I reviewed the transaction logs from the parking lot. There was no flag. There was no irregularity. You fabricated both. And after the police confirmed the check was valid, you still refused service. Is that correct?" Todd said nothing. His lips pressed into a thin, white line. Caleb turned back to Gail. "Preserve all surveillance footage from the past 3 hours. Every camera, every angle. Nothing gets deleted." He pulled out his phone and dialed. The lobby heard every word. "This is Caleb Wilson, General Counsel. Open an immediate investigation into the Orchard Hills branch. Pull the full employee file for Todd Henderson, including all prior complaints." He hung up, dialed again, placed the phone on Gail's desk, speaker on, volume up.
"Human Resources, this is Linda."
"Linda, this is Caleb Wilson. I am formally recommending the immediate termination of employee Todd Henderson, badge number 4182, Orchard Hills branch. Grounds: gross misconduct, fabrication of fraud alerts, racially motivated denial of service, and filing a false police report." A pause on the line. Then, "Understood. Processing now." Send his employment contract to the Orchard Hills branch printer. 10 seconds later, the printer behind Gail's desk hummed to life. Pages slid out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Todd Henderson's employment contract with Crestline National Bank. His name. His signature. His start date. Every clause that had kept him employed for 6 years. Caleb picked up the pages. He held them in the air, just high enough for Todd to see his own name staring back at him from across the lobby. Todd's face went paper white. His voice came out broken. You can't." Caleb walked to the shredder beside the filing cabinet. He didn't rush. Every step was deliberate. Every eye in the room followed him. First page in. The machine whirred. Thin white strips curled out the bottom. Second page. The hum grew louder. Todd's hand gripped the edge of his counter. Third page. Someone in the lobby exhaled, sharp, involuntary, like they'd been holding their breath. Fourth page. The last one. The shredder swallowed it whole. Dead silence. No phones ringing. No keyboards clicking. Just the fading hum of the machine and the soft flutter of shredded paper settling into the bin. That sound, that quiet, mechanical whir, was the loudest thing in the room. Not because of volume, but because every single person in that lobby understood what it meant. 6 years of Todd Henderson's career at Crestline National Bank reduced to confetti. Todd stood frozen behind his window, mouth open, eyes blank, hands flat on the counter like the floor might give way beneath him. Caleb turned to face the lobby. He didn't raise his voice. No one should have to prove they deserve basic respect in a bank they've trusted for 15 years. Then he walked to the entrance, where Brenda now stood just inside the door. She'd come back in. She'd seen everything. He took her hand, gently, the way a son holds his mother's hand when he wants her to know, "I've got you." "Let's go, Mom. I'll handle the rest." They walked out together. Brenda's head was high. Her shoulders were straight. She didn't look back. Behind them, Denise's phone captured the final frame. Mother and son stepping through the glass door into the Georgia sunlight, and strips of shredded paper still curling from the machine, like the last breath of a career that deserved to die. It took less than 3 hours for everything to collapse. Caleb drove his mother home first, walked her to the door, made sure she had water, made sure she sat down. Then he kissed her forehead, got back in his car, and called CEO Elliot Shaw directly. He didn't sugarcoat it. He laid out every detail: the fabricated flag, the excessive ID demands, the public humiliation, the police call, the confirmed check, the continued refusal. He named Todd. He named Gail. And he made one thing clear. This isn't an isolated incident, Elliot. There are prior complaints, multiple, all buried. Shaw was silent for 5 seconds. Then he said 2 words. "Shut it down." By noon, the Orchard Hills branch was under immediate internal review. A compliance team was dispatched from headquarters. Every computer was locked for audit. Every employee was told to cooperate fully or face termination. Todd Henderson's firing, initiated by Caleb at the branch, was formally ratified by HR before lunch. His badge was deactivated. His system login was killed. His employee record was stamped with 5 words that would follow him forever. Terminated for cause: gross misconduct. No severance, no letter of recommendation, no quiet exit. Security arrived at 12:45. Todd was still at his window. He hadn't processed a single transaction since Caleb left. Just sitting there, clicking the mouse on nothing, like a man who hadn't accepted the building was already on fire. "Mr. Henderson, you need to come with me." Todd looked up. His eyes were red. Not from crying, from shock. The hollowed-out stare of someone who just realized the ground beneath them was gone. "I was just doing my job. I was protecting the bank." Security didn't respond. A cardboard box landed on the counter, the universal symbol of a career ending in real time. Todd stared at it. Then, slowly, he began placing his things inside. A coffee mug, a framed photo, a stress ball shaped like a globe. Small things that looked pathetic under fluorescent light. He stepped out from behind the counter for the last time. The lobby was half empty now, but the people still there watched. The same people who had watched Brenda get humiliated now watched Todd walk toward the door, shoulders hunched, box clutched to his chest, eyes on the floor. He passed the shredder on his way out. The bin was still full of white strips, the remains of his contract. He didn't look at it, but everyone else did. The glass door closed behind him. Nobody said goodbye. Gail Prescott lasted a little longer, but not by much. Administrative leave, effective immediately. She tried calling Caleb's office 4 times. Each call was redirected to HR. On the 5th attempt, a legal assistant answered in a voice as flat as a court filing. "Ms. Prescott, all communication regarding your employment must go through Legal and Human Resources. Do not contact the General Counsel's office again." Gail sat in her car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes. Engine running, hands on the wheel, going nowhere. It was finally sinking in. This wasn't a complaint she could bury. The General Counsel's own mother had been the target, and everything was on camera. Speaking of cameras, that evening, Denise Calloway sat in her living room and uploaded a 4-minute clip to social media. The caption: "This is what happened to a retired school teacher trying to deposit a check at Crestline National Bank today." Everything was in that video. Todd's sneer, Gail's crossed arms, Brenda's trembling hands, the police confirmation, and the moment that made people stop scrolling. Caleb feeding Todd's contract into the shredder, page by page, while the lobby stood in stunned silence. By midnight, 50,000 views. By sunrise, 300,000. Local news stations were calling Denise for comment. The shredder clip was being shared with one line repeated everywhere. Her son was the bank's top lawyer. Back in Orchard Hills, the house was quiet. Brenda sat at her kitchen table. The check, still undeposited, lay in its envelope. The overhead light hummed. The faucet dripped. Caleb sat across from her, tie loosened, jacket draped over the chair. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Brenda said it, quietly, almost to herself. "I wasn't surprised, Caleb. That's the worst part. I wasn't even surprised." Caleb reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Within 48 hours, the investigation cracked wide open. Crestline's internal affairs team descended on the Orchard Hills branch like auditors at a crime scene. They pulled 2 years of transaction records. They reviewed every customer complaint. They cross-referenced service times, ID requirements, and refusal rates across every teller window. What they found was not subtle. Todd Henderson had refused or delayed service to Black and Latino customers at a rate 4 times higher than white customers with identical transaction profiles. Same check amounts, same account standings, same documentation. The only difference was the color of the person standing at his window. And the complaints. 3 formal ones in 2 years, all from people of color, had been filed, received, and buried. Each marked "resolved internally" by Gail Prescott. No investigation, no interview, no written warning, not even a conversation. But the worst part came from Gail's own inbox. Internal Affairs pulled her emails. There it was, a message sent to a colleague 8 months ago in response to the second complaint against Todd. 5 words that told you everything. Just more sensitivity nonsense. Filed. That's what she called it when a Latino father said Todd made him feel like a criminal for cashing his own paycheck. That's what she called it when a Black woman said Todd demanded 3 forms of ID and told her the bank wasn't a charity. Sensitivity nonsense. Filed away, forgotten. Until now. The media didn't need an invitation. Denise Calloway's video crossed 2 million views by Wednesday evening. The shredder clip, Caleb feeding Todd's contract into the machine, had been isolated, screen-recorded, and reposted across every major platform. Atlanta's local stations ran it first. Camera crews parked outside the branch. By Thursday morning, national outlets picked it up. The headlines wrote themselves. Bank teller called police on black teacher over a check from her own son. Her son is the bank's top lawyer. He shredded the contract on the spot, inside the Crestline Bank incident. Community leaders held a press conference outside the branch. A local pastor called it a textbook case of institutional racism hiding behind procedure. A city councilwoman demanded a full public audit. Then the other voices started coming forward. Former customers who had quietly closed their accounts began sharing their own stories. A black nurse who said Todd told her that her direct deposit looked suspicious. A Latino business owner who said Gail refused his loan application because his paperwork didn't feel right. An elderly black man who said he waited 45 minutes while white customers were served ahead of him. A pattern, years long, branch-wide, exposed. Attorney Raymond Cooper saw the story Thursday night. By Friday morning, he was on Brenda's porch. Cooper was in his 50s, a civil rights lawyer with 3 decades of experience and a reputation for cases exactly like this. He didn't chase cameras. He showed up when the law had failed someone and made it stop failing. He sat at Brenda's kitchen table and laid it out plainly. Mrs. Wilson, what happened to you wasn't just rude, it was illegal. He explained the charges. A formal discrimination complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A parallel complaint with the Georgia Attorney General. Violations of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Georgia's Fair Lending Act. Brenda listened, nodded slowly, then asked one question. Will this help the next person who walks in there? Cooper looked at her for a long moment. That's exactly what it's designed to do. She signed the paperwork that afternoon. Meanwhile, the walls were closing in at Crestline headquarters. CEO Elliot Shaw convened an emergency board meeting Friday evening. Legal counsel presented the findings: surveillance footage, transaction data, Gail's emails, prior complaints, media coverage, mounting legal exposure. The board voted unanimously. Todd Henderson's termination was formally ratified with a permanent flag on his record. The shredded contract became a symbol in internal communications. A company-wide memo referenced it as the moment Crestline's zero-tolerance commitment became real. Gail Prescott was terminated, fired for systematic failure to enforce anti-discrimination policies and active suppression of complaints. Access revoked before she left the building. The board also approved a public apology to Brenda Wilson to be delivered by the CEO at a press conference. They committed $2 million to an independent diversity audit of all 85 branches. And they established a customer ombudsman office for discrimination complaints, reporting directly to the general counsel, bypassing branch managers entirely. Caleb recused himself from every decision involving his mother's case, but his internal report was the catalyst for all of it. Todd's downfall didn't stop at termination. The shredder video played on cable news for 3 straight days. Todd tried giving a statement to a local reporter, claiming he was just following procedures. The reporter asked one question. The police confirmed the check was real. Why did you still refuse? Todd hung up. He never spoke publicly again. The Georgia Attorney General's office opened a preliminary inquiry into criminal charges, specifically filing a false police report. Gail fared no better. Her sensitivity nonsense email leaked to the press within hours of her firing. It became a headline of its own. She applied for unemployment. Crestline contested the claim. Termination for cause. Denied. Her lawyer released a statement saying she regrets any misunderstanding. Social media tore it apart before the ink was dry. And Brenda got her moment. The following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after she'd walked into that bank with a cashier's check and walked out with nothing but humiliation, she stood beside Raymond Cooper at Crestline's headquarters press conference. Elliot Shaw stepped to the microphone. Cameras flashed. Recorders blinked red. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, turning to face her directly, "you deserved respect, and our institution failed you. We are committed, publicly and permanently, to ensuring this never happens again." The room waited. Brenda leaned into the microphone. She didn't read from a paper. She didn't look at her lawyer. She just spoke. The same steady voice that had held together in that lobby when everything was falling apart around her. "I just hope the next woman who walks into that bank doesn't have to go through what I went through." The room erupted in applause. 6 months later, the Orchard Hills branch of Crestline National Bank looked the same from the outside. Same glass windows, same little American flag by the door, same corner of Maple and 4th. But inside, everything had changed. The new branch manager's name was Sharon Davis, black woman, early 40s, 15 years of banking experience. Hired as part of Crestline's Reformed Leadership Initiative. She ran that branch the way it should have been run from the beginning, with professionalism, with consistency, and with the kind of respect that doesn't check your skin color before deciding how to treat you. The teller windows had new faces behind them. The lobby felt different, lighter, like a room that had finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. Todd Henderson never worked in banking again. He applied to 4 different financial institutions in the months after his termination. Every single one turned him down. The Shredder video followed him like a shadow. His name had become a cautionary tale, the kind HR departments reference in training seminars without saying out loud. Last anyone heard, he was working at a retail store 2 towns over, stocking shelves, scanning barcodes. No counter, no customers asking for his approval, no power to abuse. The false police report inquiry from the Georgia Attorney General's office was still pending. It hung over him like a cloud that wouldn't move. Gail Prescott moved out of state, somewhere in South Carolina. She never made another public statement after her lawyer's "regrets any misunderstanding" line, the one the internet had shredded almost as thoroughly as Caleb had shredded Todd's contract. She deleted her social media, changed her phone number, disappeared the way people disappear when they know the world has made up its mind about them. Brenda's kitchen renovation was finished. New countertops, soft gray tile, a farmhouse sink she'd been dreaming about for 3 years. Caleb had offered to pay for upgrades, but Brenda refused. "The check covered what I needed," she told him. "I don't need more than that." She'd finally deposited it the day after the incident, at a different branch, 15 minutes across town. The teller there processed it in under 3 minutes, smiled, said, "Have a nice day, Mrs. Wilson." That was it. That was all it ever needed to be. Caleb didn't talk about the incident much. He wasn't the type to take victory laps. But the changes he made at Crestline spoke louder than any interview could. He implemented a company-wide anti-discrimination certification program. Every employee, Every branch, every level, was required to complete it annually. Failure to pass meant suspension. No exceptions. He created a direct hotline for customers to report discriminatory treatment. Calls didn't go to branch managers anymore. They went straight to a dedicated team under his office. No middlemen, no buried complaints. No more sensitivity nonsense disappearing into a drawer. A journalist from the Atlanta Constitution asked him for a quote for a small profile piece. Caleb thought about it for a moment. Then he said, "My mother taught third graders for almost 30 years. She taught them to be fair. I'm just trying to make sure the adults remember that lesson." That quote ran as the closing line of the article. It was shared 40,000 times. Back in Orchard Hills, life returned to its rhythm. Brenda watered her porch plants in the morning, drank coffee from her chipped #1 teacher mug, watched the school bus rumble past, and smiled, the way she always did. One afternoon, her neighbor leaned over the fence and asked how she was doing. Really doing. Brenda set down her watering can. She looked at the house, at the new kitchen window behind her, at the framed photo of Caleb in the hallway she could see through the screen door. "He didn't do it because I'm his mother," she said. "He did it because it was wrong. And that's exactly what I raised him to do," Denise recorded. Caleb acted. The system only worked because people refused to let it stay broken. Institutions don't fix themselves. People fix institutions. Through courage, through accountability, through refusing to look away. So let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone get treated this way and not known what to do? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit home for you, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because these stories, they need to be told. Yeah, like, respect costs you nothing. But disrespect, that'll cost you everything. Nah, for real though. Never judge someone by how they look. You literally never know who they are or who they raised. Karma ain't loud. It's just precise. Stay humble, y'all.